Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey here for our round 25 NRL preview show where we'll break down every single NRL game, give you our thoughts on it and also break it down from a punting perspective. Joined every week by my brother Jacob Wynn. Winnie, how are you, my friend?
Gone pretty good, thanks, mate. After a 4-1 best bet week and won the mixed matchup as well at $3 odds. We've got the best bet record, as you can see on the screen, back to 50%, right where we were at the very beginning of the year, but a bit worse off because we've got to risk 11 to win 10. Nonetheless, it's been a really strong run the last, honestly, 10 weeks, and that includes right around the time we incorporated Clarkey's Collect. So I've got to say to you again, mate, you weren't here on the recap. Commiserations for Foz's 300th, but well done to you for making the trip to support your team and bringing in another collect for the followers.
Yeah, I was really happy when the Sharkies won there. And I actually took a little bit more of a risky multi in my personal approach. Of course, I did back Clarkey's Collect, but I took the Sharkies by 4 in my riskier one, which I was spewing because you guys know me. Usually I do play a little bit cautious there. And to be honest, I thought it was over. I didn't think we were going to win that one, but they found a way to win. So credit to the Sharkies there. Quick housekeeping point for this show, guys, and this will relate to the recap show for round 25. Winnie and I will actually both be at the Titans and Roosters game on Sunday, so unable to do the recap show at our regular time. Winnie, is there anything or any time slot that's jumping out to you for the recap show to go up instead?
I think we'll try and do something Monday night. We might just do a mini recap. Yeah, we're actually going to be there in person with a little pod crew, which is very exciting. It's just going to mean, not possible to record live straight after the round, but it'll be great to hang out and see the crew. And it's a exciting game that we get to go watch. It's got a few big implications anyway, but we'll get to that one. That's not till Sunday. Before then, I've got some best bets, which I might as well roll straight into. I think a lot of people who followed the pod for a long time knew this one was coming. New Zealand plus 7.5 at $1.91 on 365. It's also 6.5 on Sportsbet, $1.89. It is pretty much as simple as it's Sean Johnson's last home game. And I've said for weeks that I'd have my eye on this game. I actually do think New Zealand can hang with the Bulldogs. What evidence have I got for that? The whole season, you're going to say they can't, but they played each other not that long ago and it went absolutely down to the wire. As great as the Dogs have been, this could be a letdown spot. The atmosphere will be real. The pressure on the referees will be real. And New Zealand is going to give everything. It's their grand final. You can't go too wrong taking that start over a converted try. I'm going to play Brisbane on Friday night at home to the Eels minus 8.5. Now, $1.91. 365, but it's 8.5 or 9.5, which is essentially the same thing at $1.90 everywhere. And it's about Brisbane not wanting to slump to 7 straight home losses. It's about Brisbane coming in off the bye. And there's not much else I can say about the Broncos. They did outscore the Cowboys 36 straight to end that one and save a little face. It's a disastrous season nonetheless, but at least I know Brisbane have got something to play for. Para, the season couldn't end quickly enough for them. So take the minus 8.5 and then go all the way to Sunday afternoon. Not the game we're at, but the Derby, Dragons, Sharks. And I'm going to play either 1 to 12 at $1.80 or 365. I've just got two teams that are finals bound, that like to play a hard-nosed, aggressive, gritty style. Both are not, well, the game probably means more to Cronulla because the Dragons could lose and still make the 8. The Sharkies may not be able to lose and still make the 4, but the St. George is at home. So I feel like both sides are highly motivated and I feel fairly confident it's going to fall in that corridor, which gives me just 3 best bets this week. But I feel pretty comfortable in each of those.
Yeah, early indications are we're seeing most of those games pretty similarly, which is always great there. We will get to it game by game in just 1 second, but before we do so, we're going to play a clip from the CEO of Top Sport. It is Mr. Tristan Merlehan.
G'day everyone, it's Tristan Merlehan here from Top Sport. We're almost near finals now, only 3 weeks away, and there's some big games which will determine who lines up there and in which position they finish the regular season in. So a really important 3 weeks, and it's also a tricky week, or a tricky few weeks to bookmate coming up with obviously some of the games where the teams are out of contention now we've got to find out where we sit the line. So this first game, Manly Tigers, has shifted from 14 to 15.5. It looks like some of those games are going to see one-way traffic, albeit that a few of those less liked teams have shown a bit of backbone over the last month or so. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. One of the bigger moves of the weekend are the Warriors. They've gone from 7.5 into 5.5. Obviously, Sean Johnson's had a great career for them, and it's his last home game where they've renamed the stadium. So obviously that's been factored into the price over the last couple of days. Then the other game that's moved significantly has been the Knights against the Bunnies, where that game's gone from 4.5 out to 6.5. Where obviously Cody Walker out there for the Rabbitohs, which has seen a shift. And then finally, the Dragons against the Sharks. Both sides in good form. Obviously, a rivalry game out there at Wollongong, and the markets has moved towards the Sharks. It's gone over that key number, opened at 3.5, now at 4.5, but a skew back towards the plus. So, going to be a very interesting week of football. Good luck if you're having a wager over the weekend, and of course, gamble responsibly.
Good stuff there from Tristan. Always thank you very much for that clip. And let's jump into it, Winnie. The best bets are on screen.
You answered in the comments, but I thought we should address this. It just hasn't really come up yet. But James asked, have we got the better same game multi? And I appreciate that we did it. We just haven't really talked about this. And the last time I gave out a better same game multi, I think it won at $17. So every week people message me and we've just said we don't have it this week, or the only multi is Dabble. People may or may not be aware that Better merged with Bluebet, and we didn't really know what that was going to mean. And once that was officially that came through, we were asking them, because people know that they sponsor a segment on this show, and we've got a dedicated market that I create each week. And we were told, business as usual. But then, a couple of weeks ago, we were basically told that the agreement that we had with Better is ended effective immediately, because Bluebet's kind of the ones who are in control in that partnership. So the Better app still works the same. We've still had best bets on Better and whatnot, and we've obviously suggested people join them over the last couple of years. There were plenty of reasons for people to do that, and we'll see what it looks like when it becomes a totally merged entity. But that's the explanation of kind of, sadly, why we haven't been able to continue with that special market, which was really profitable last year. And to be honest, this year, I did say I won a 17-1, but I think that was the only winner.
I think you had one other one that was like $13. I swear you had
can't remember, because I've won a lot more of the same game as with Dabble this year, to be fair. So it probably wasn't that greatly profitable this year. It was closer to a break even. But I can't control which bookie my same gamer wins on. Overall, as you can see, we're up 17.5 units. It's been a pretty good run, probably one of the more positive aspects of my year this year. And I still am creating same gamers every week on Dabble, as well as the fact you can use what you and I both say to create your own same gamers. I'm giving you best bets. We talk about the total if we have a strong feeling. And you're even supplying try scorers in addition to Nicole. Mentioned on the recap, but great call there at the Dolphins game, mate. Avarillo and Bronson Cherry. That was juicy. So interested to hear which try scorers you might like this week as we go into round 25.
Yeah, no, once Avarillo scored, I was like, awesome. Hopefully some people got on. And then it kind of got to, I think it was the 60th minute maybe when Sherry scored, or maybe even past that. And I was like, it's not going to come through. But at least, people will still get the main bet, I suppose. But now when he scored, I was ecstatic. I actually didn't back it myself, to be honest. I missed that game, but I really hope some other people will manage to get on that one. Ben, there are not enough likes on this planet to get this. I don't know if you'd call it a goatee, but yeah, you've called it a thing. I think that's probably a more fair term for it, mate. Let's jump into it, Winnie. Game 1 is Thursday, 7:50 p.m. The Tigers host the Manly Seagulls at Leichhardt Oval. Line was set at minus 14.5 against Manly. That's now moved to minus 15.5 since team lists. Tommy Talau is out, so Tolatau Kola moves into the centres, and Carl Lawton returns at back row. For the Tigers, Junior Tupou and Solomon Alamalo are their new wingers. Latu Fayonu joins their bench. And when I look at this one, Winnie, super simple in the head-to-head market in terms of who you would be tipping in this one. But when we talk lines, I know you have liked the Tigers at that double digit a few times this year. Do you think they can cover more than 2 converted tries in this one?
It's a tricky one. I hate to say any game looks simple, because then everyone would just bet it that way. And if a team's if you're highly confident a team's going to win, you generally would look their way on the line as well. This feels pretty clear cut. I've got a Manly team that looks really sharp, that's had their fair share of injuries and important players out with rep duty, but now is playing basically their strongest 17 of the season. I mean, one player that they've unearthed, which I don't know if we've mentioned on the recap, but like Lehigh Hopewadi, how good is he going? The teenager on the wing there. Tommy Talau's had a good year. He's out, but Cooler? No, it's we do say Cooler?
Yeah, Tommy Tolau out, so Tolatau Kohler moves
it's Kohler,
to
right? Sorry. I think we wanted to call him Stubby Cooler, but it's Tolatau Kohler comes in. The top 4 is still possible for Manly, and even if Manly doesn't quite get there, a home final it would definitely be the goal at the very least from where Manly stands. West really needed to get a win after so many unimpressive performances in a row, and you get handed a home game against a zombie South side, and you still actually make tough work of it to win on the siren. The truth is the Tigers are still sitting in 17th and probably are still the 17th best team in the league. So nobody's going to argue that there isn't a big gap between these teams. I expect Manly to play well. I'll tell you why I'm not laying the points with Manly. Look, a Thursday night game, you could say that means Manly can kind of empty the chamber, fire away here. More important games to come, but they will be on longer turnarounds. However, those important games, I mean, Manly plays the Dogs and Sharks to end the year. That's the 2 teams directly above. It couldn't get any more important than that. And then straight after those 2 games, you're into finals. And Manly's not going to, top 4 is possible, but in all likelihood, Manly's going to be playing elimination finals games as well. So if there was ever a game to maybe take your eye off the ball a little bit, it could be this one. Manly's also had that tie earlier in the year, so they're one of the few teams where plus minus is not a factor. So if you're up 10, you're up 14, you're even up 20 late in the game, Turbo could come off early. And instead of them putting the foot to the throat and trying to run up the score, they could just be trying to make sure they take care of business. And that is an important factor when the line is minus 14.5. As for the Tigers, you could see them relaxing. Like last week, they felt the opportunity to win. They had to fight for 80. They got the win. So do they exhale now? Sometimes, though, when a team's really struggling and gets a win, it really does give a bit of confidence. It takes a little bit of pressure off. Leichhardt's not a big factor for me. Manly doesn't have to travel far and it won't be intimidated, but it does at least mean a little extra motivation for West, which those were those reasons towards the end there why I didn't lay the points. But I wouldn't play the plus either because Manly's far superior to the Tigers.
Yeah, the line is definitely in a difficult spot there. I suppose I'll start with what you said about the Tigers and how teams can sometimes get a win and then repeat that effort or get a bit of a confidence boost from it. And they did do that earlier this year. The Titans kind of played really poorly against them. The Tigers took that opportunity and beat them. And then I thought, well, there's no way they beat the Raiders. The Raiders lose to them next week. And the Tigers did make it back-to-back wins. So they have done it one time this year. But Colt from YouTube leaves a comment saying Manly should run right in as if they are fair dinkum. And I'm seeing it that same way as well, Colt. I thought the Tigers were able to get the win last round, but it was probably another occasion of where their opponents just weren't where they needed to be. And the Tigers took advantage of that. And I've really liked Manly's attack of late. They have looked super dangerous. And I went back and averaged in their last 5 games, they're averaging 36 points. Last week against the Warriors was the only game of their last 5 where they didn't hit at least 30. And they hit 24 there. So 1 converted try off. Then when we go to the Tigers and we look at their season average over a larger snapshot again, they do average 30 points conceded per game. So I think Manly will score at least 30 here. And I can't see a world where the Tigers score that many against their defense. So much so I went through and had a look. They've only scored 30 points on 3 occasions this year from their 22 games. So I deem it a pretty low probability where the Tigers can win this under any circumstances. Now, the Tigers have also lost their last 9 games in a row to top 8 sides. And I actually view Manly one step above that at this stage of the competition. I think they have top 4 aspirations, and rightfully so, because they are really coming into their own recently. They have won their last 6 in a row over the Tigers, and their last meeting was in the final round last year. Manly won that 54 points to 12. I look at that Manly side from last year compared to this year, form-wise and roster-wise, I think they're stronger. So I actually could see this being a similar margin where Manly just really take them out, blow them off the park, big time Winnie. And then I actually do agree with you. We probably will see Tom Trbojevic, DC, some of these big guns taken off for the final 20 minutes. But my tip here is Manly. I believe they're more than capable of covering that 15 points based on what I've seen from them in their last 5. Alrighty, mate. Game 2 is at Friday, 6 p.m. The Warriors host the Bulldogs at Shaun Johnson Stadium. The line was set at -6.5 against the Bulldogs. That is coming in. It's now -5.5. For the Warriors, they welcome back Wade Egan. For the Bulldogs, no changes. And Winnie, I said it there. I wasn't joking. The stadium has been renamed in his honour for this game because it is officially Shaun Johnson's last game of NRL in New Zealand. And you believe the Warriors can spring an upset or at least compete really well here in their veteran teammates' final NRL game in NZ.
Yeah, I sure do, mate. And I'm looking away from the screen because I was interested to see, did my best bet have any impact on that market? As you said, it's already moved from 7.5 to 5.5 in places. Sure enough, the 365, they're in from 7.5 to 5.5, but it is still plus 6.5 on Sportsbet. So, one of the biggest operators out there, and just about everyone's got an account with them, they are remaining above the key number, which is, not too often that you will get a game where some are at 5.5, some are 6.5, such a key number. And especially with that, logic. And I think a lot of people mobilized because I think this line was 7.5 everywhere on Monday. And then when that news, which shouldn't change the outcome of the game, when the news came out that the stadium was being renamed, I actually saw an impact in the market because I think the memo got out there and people just thought, look, if I'm going to play New Zealand, this line's not going to get any higher, but it may start to come down. So I'm going to jump on it and grab my piece of it. So I'm glad that this, 7.5 was still available as we went to air tonight, and definitely still take the 6.5 if you agree with what I'm saying. And, one of the ways that I try and predict the outcome of the game is think about what we're most likely to be saying afterwards. And if New Zealand wins or goes close, it's so obvious and it's so logical that they lifted and they played inspired for Shaun Johnson. And the crowd, was a major factor. If the Dogs win it well, then I suppose people will say, oh, the inspiration didn't matter. The Dogs are on another level to the Wars this year. That last part's true. But every team's still going to have ups and downs. Some games will be better than others. I do feel Canterbury could easily suffer a letdown after so many big weeks in a row. New Zealand's a hard team to predict at the best of times, but if there was ever a game where you could actually count on the Warriors to come in focused and determined and defend with desperation, and this was a top 4 defensive team last year with similar personnel, it's this one. So I don't think I'm alone. I appreciate that line has moved for a reason, that lots of people are seeing that you've got to factor it into the point spread. And perhaps 365 being an offshore bookie, maybe they, a little bit slower on the uptake. And I dare say that some bets have just come in the last few minutes and they've woken up and lowered that line as well. It is pretty much the Shaun Johnson last home game factor. But in saying that, not everybody's going to buy into that. The Dogs have been so profitable and so impressive for punters. The Dogs will have their supporters in this game too. So I think there'll be a balance in the betting. And what goes hand in hand with the Warriors' effort is the crowd. I think is going to be one of the most unreal atmospheres this whole season. And it seriously does put pressure on officials, which means it just seems to me that when New Zealand plays important games at home and the crowd's really up for it, they always get the early penalties, the early 6 against, which just gives you a chance to get on top. Now, you've still got to take those opportunities when you get that early territory and possession and kind of build your game from there. And we've seen the Dogs at their best can repel a side like New Zealand. But again, I go back to the fact that I know New Zealand can mix it up with Canterbury because they went to play the Bulldogs at ANZ, and am I saying that right? Accor. Not ANZ. Hasn't been ANZ for a long time, right? At Accor. And And New Zealand suffered, I think, at least the whole back three got knocked out of that game, if not other backline players as well. And it still went to golden point. So New Zealand knows they can do it. Egan is back, which is very timely. You can't go too wrong playing a team in their grand final, which essentially is what it is. Now, that's not to say it's not important for Canterbury, because Canterbury continues to push for top four. But as I said, I've been eyeing this game for a few weeks since we knew Johnson announced his retirement, and I'm definitely taking it with a line above a converted try.
And that really is the spanner in the works for this game. I think if these two sides were playing in Sydney again and Shaun Johnson was re-signed for another season, I think a lot of people would prefer the Bulldogs, and I think that line would be even further against them there. You referenced their game in round 18. Yes, at Core Stadium, Bulldogs won that in the 87th minute via a field goal. Of course, things didn't go their way. They lost their fullback and both wingers in that game. Since that game, the Bulldogs have only lost once. That was to the Cowboys by 2 points. And since that game, the Warriors have only had one win since it, and that was over the Tigers, which is probably an expected result. So completely opposite results since the last time they met. But of course, the spanner in the work is the Shaun Johnson news. We would expect the Warriors would not lose all three of their back three again. So that does bring this game a lot closer in my mind as well. Now, the Bulldogs, they are confirmed for finals. They can lose every game from here and they will still be playing finals football, which is something they've not done in a long time. So there is a chance they slack off a little bit, but they do also have top four aspirations. So I think that mitigates it a little bit. I'll be honest, all season when I've broken down these Bulldogs games, I've kind of referenced the stats from the past or said why it's against them. And I was concerned with that last round in Queensland. They had a poor record in Queensland. And it's another thing that the Bulldogs have corrected. You know, all season they've kind of gone and remediated all these little issues that they've had. But again, the stats do not like them in this one at all. They have lost 6 of their last 7 against the Warriors. Their only win was a core field goal we just referenced. And they've not won at Go Media Stadium in over 12 years. So I will say, if this wasn't Shaun Johnson's final game, in New Zealand, that is, I would be tipping the Bulldogs comfortably. I don't think I'd be thinking about it all too much. But because of that unknown, I'm going to say either side 1-12 winning. I think this is a game where Bulldogs will be competing, trying to keep in touch with the top 4. And the Warriors, who have shown their class at stages in their last 5, will be desperate to get the win for Shaun Johnson. So my prediction's either side 1-12 in this. From a betting angle, I'm not sure if we could get that at $1.80. So probably can't tip it there. I'd say
you will be able to get that at $1.80. Ryan asked, was that considered as a best bet? And Ryan knows that I always consider, if I like the underdog, which I do, and I've said I'm playing the New Zealand line, that I always consider either team 1-12. That's the type of bet you want to play when you think the underdog can keep it closer than others expect. And the reason I didn't play that is because, what do you reckon, Ryan? What do you reckon will happen? What do you reckon would happen if I said I like New Zealand and I went either team 1-12? You think the underdog will win 13 plus? I mean, it would be a certainty that New Zealand would win this game 13 plus if I played it either 1-12. So, and in truth, as I say, people can't visualize the Bulldogs getting beaten 13 plus by New Zealand, but it wouldn't take that much for the Dogs to have a letdown spot. You know, I thought it was coming, that trip to Brisbane. But I was completely wrong, right? But I still feel that the Bulldogs, as awesome as they've been, even the best teams in the comp will have a bad game here or there. And this is just going to be a very tough road trip that they'll go in there with the intention to win. But if they meet a Warriors side that's just utterly inspired, it could get out of hand. And of course, on the other hand, if the Warriors are flat and the Bulldogs dominate, then, you know, covering a 6.5 or a 7.5 line, you're only one back-breaking try away from 13 plus the other direction. So I just take my chances and just put all my eggs in the basket of the team that I think should be bang up for it, which is New Zealand.
Maybe I'm being a bit too cautious, or maybe I'm overreacting based on last week to go either side 1-12, but I really thought the Dolphins
No, I can't knock that bet. And I actually expect it will be a tight game, but there actually is a variance element there that this would be the type of game where I'd back New Zealand plus 7.5, but then I'd also have a bit of money on New Zealand head-to-head, and I'd have a bit on, you know, New Zealand halftime full-time and New Zealand to win by a margin, because it's the type of game where they could massively outperform their average level for this season.
Yep, and I love the way you broke that down after. It makes perfect sense, mate. Game 3 is Friday, 8 p.m. Broncos host the Eels. We're at Suncorp Stadium, and the line is set at -9.5 against the Broncos. No move since team list dropped. Tristan Saylor is their fullback, and Selwyn Cobbo returns on the wing. For the Eels, Micah Sivo and Kelma Tuolungi enter their starting side. Sean Lane shifts to prop. And we have here, Winnie, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but we do have the Panthers' sons from the last 2 grand finals, and they are playing off for nothing but pride here. And I say that more as a strange stat that these sides were so good in previous years. Just 1 or 2 years later for both from being in a grand final, it's round 25, and they're playing for nothing but pride, mate, which is strange to say. But you think the Broncos will have more than enough at home to beat this Eels side?
So let's address that. Playing for nothing but pride, but are there any Broncos fans in the chat watching right now? Broncos fans want to believe their season is still alive. That maybe they thought it was dead after the Titans lost, but then they went and beat the Cowboys in North Queensland, and they're not mathematically out of it. So let's just talk about what that will take. The Broncos definitely wanted your Titans to upset St. George, because then it would be a lot more realistic. Brisbane needs to make up 2 wins on the Dragons, which means absolutely Brisbane must win out their remaining 3, which would also include beating Melbourne. That's a pretty tall order. But let's put that aside and say Brisbane actually does win the final 3 games. Here's your problem. St. George will have to lose their two of their remaining games. And the Dragons also face these Eels next week and a dead Raiders side in round 27. So it's very unlikely. And on top of that, since the Broncos beat the Cowboys, they got the news that Reece Walsh is out for the season. So, and remember I said that the Cowboys were up 18-6. My best bet was on the Cowboys, of course. And Reece Walsh is grimacing and favouring that wrist. And I'm thinking Brisbane's no chance of a comeback. And suddenly I watch them score the next 36 straight points, even more inconceivable to me. It restored a little bit of pride, but not much more than that, because Brisbane's had an awful record the last couple of months. And what a fall from grace. You talked about the last couple of grand finals. I was going to talk about that as well. A year ago, Brisbane was clearly one of the best 2 teams in the competition. Less than a year ago, they had a 3-try lead in the grand final. I'm sorry to be cruel to Brisbane fans, keep bringing that up, but here they are going to miss the 8. It's an awful outcome. Parramatta knows that all too well, as you said. But look, Brisbane's got plenty of time to think about what went wrong this year in the off-season. For now, what I do have is Brisbane at home, off that bye, have lost 6 or 7 straight home games, depending on whether you'll count the win in Magic Round, which wasn't technically a home game. It's still an awful home record for Brisbane. That's got to serve as major motivation. And again, the season just can't end quickly enough for Para. Yeah, they did get up for the Penrith game and should have won. That almost makes it worse. And then Para was back down to earth last week. And I don't see it. I think Brisbane will come out with force and try and restore some faith and respect in front of those loyal fans, where Brisbane's still one of the most highly attended home tickets in the competition. And a Friday night footy with Cobbo back as well. Sailor's capable at fullback. When a game's across the board, the same line everywhere, I'd love to find one bookie that's lagging. I couldn't, but I just said, look, I'll lay the points here. It feels pretty cut and dry to me. And I'm getting under double digits, and I'm playing a Brisbane team that's been so bad generally against the spread the last couple of months. So I'm not paying a hefty premium to go against Para.
I'm with the Broncos here as well for 2 key reasons. And I think Broncos former side, they are always match on Friday night in that 8 p.m. time slot, and their fans do show up. This year, despite their relatively poor form by their standards, they still have the largest average crowd of any side, so their fans are still there. Meanwhile, the Eels, when we look at how they perform in away games, they have lost 9 out of 10 this year in away games. Their only win was over the Warriors in New Zealand, who have lost 7 of their past 9 games. So with hindsight, probably not as impressive as we might have thought it was at the time. So I will really look to Suncorp as a key factor in this contest. I will quickly note, I went back and had a look, and strangely enough, the Eels have beaten the Broncos in their last 3 meetings at Sun Club. But I just feel this Eels side is a real distance from where they were back in 22, 23 when they were playing a little bit better footy. Second factor for me is the bye. And the Broncos, not so much in the Cowboys game. I would say they played in the Cowboys game like a side that knew the bye was coming up. But prior to that, looked like a tired side that needed a little bit of a spell, a little bit of a freshen up. And they do get that here. Whereas the Eels, they haven't really had an easy game in a while now. It seems like they got into a real battle with Penrith for 80 minutes. And then they got, relatively thumped there by the Roosters. So I think the Broncos will be the freshest side as well, which is important at this time of the year, I think. And I also went back and had a look at the Broncos stats because we all know they've been poor this year and we've all spoken about it. Look, they still have almost double the wins of the Eels. They have 9, Eels have 5. They have a higher defensive efficiency rating. They score more points. They concede less points, and they complete their sets at the exact same percentage the Eels do. So whilst we can sit here and say the Broncos have been poor and that much is obvious, looking at it from a statistic perspective, they have been superior to the Eels in almost every single area. I thought the Eels looked flat last round against the Roosters there, and I think we kind of expected that. As you said, it was their version of a grand final against the Panthers a fortnight ago now. Now it seems like they're just going to limp their way to the end of this season with not much to gain. They're not even really playing to impress the same coach for next year. Yes, Jason Riles is watching in the background, but we have 4 players in their starting lineup in this game that have been told you can go next year. So there's a lot of disharmony at the Eels. I will predict the Broncos at the line in this one and match you on your best bet there, mate. I think they can get it done.
No, I absolutely agree with that. Their coach point. The coach isn't there next year. So you're really putting in the extra effort at training. There's extra effort in the game that can be the difference, even if it's just the difference in the margin that you lose by, that the coach appreciates. Well, he's not there. He's not deciding your future. Whereas Kevin Walters will still decide the future of some of these fringe Broncos players. As I said, they're going to have a good hard look at himself this offseason, figure out what they're going to change. And the likes of a Paddy Carrigan, is safe next year, or Adam Reynolds as well. But not everyone else is going to be safe. So there is still that more motivation to earn Kevy's trust. And it is important to Kevy to finish this year with some wins, especially in front of the home faithful.
I agree. And it's an interesting point about coaches there. It's actually the Eels head coach in this one that will be the assistant coach under Kevin Walters next year. So maybe they'll meet up for a coffee pre-game and he'll show Kevy the rule book to get a bit of favour with his new boss. Who knows? Game 4, mate, is Saturday, 3 p.m. Raiders host the Panthers here. It's at GIO. I always say this, Winnie. I always say it's here at GIO Stadium. Is everyone here is in Canberra with me? It is at GIO Stadium in Canberra. The line was set at -9.5 against the Panthers, and it has not moved. Jerome Luai and Brad Schneider are their new halves. Luke Summerton moves to hooker. That's because Mitch Kenny is out suspended, and Liam Martin returns from his suspension. For the Raiders, Jordan Rapiner is back. He moves to fullback. That shifts KO Weeks into the halves. Albert Hopewadi is on the wing there. Sebastian Chris in the centres, and Ethan Strange is out for this one. All right, Winnie, deja vu of sorts here for the Panthers. Once again, they find themselves without their main man in Nathan Cleary. How do you think they fare against the Raiders in the nation's capital in this one?
This is another one that probably seems simple on face value because Penrith doesn't lose 2 games in a row very often. Cleary is as big an out as they come, but injured player theory applies, and we've seen ample evidence of how the side performs with Luai and Schneider in the halves. Now, Kenny is also out, along with, let's not forget, Liam Martin and Sorensen both remain out, but Dylan Edwards and the Vicious Fish did return last game. What's Penrith playing for? They won't get the minor premiership, but they will still be trying to make sure they stay in second place. And Penrith's only 1 win above the Roosters with actually an inferior points differential. It's the Roosters that have the better points differential. So if the Roosters catch Penrith, what that does mean is the Roosters would host that all-important Week 1 finals game, which isn't the be-all, end-all. Both are capable of winning on the other's ground, but you want to play, at Bluebet or at Allianz. It's meaningful. And this is the type of game where I don't think many punters will be on the Raiders. I'd love to know in the comments, does anyone give the Raiders a chance here? Is anyone going to play the +9.5? And if so, why? I personally thought that for that reason, it's a logical time to play Penrith, and not many people will like the Raiders, especially after Raiders got flogged the last 2 weeks. I thought this line would be double digits. I really thought it would be 10.5, 12.5. So I could only lean to Penrith, but I have to say Canberra could be dangerous in this one. They are back at home. When you're off a flogging, we know what that Ricky calls his team out and has the backs against the wall mentality. And the Raiders are playing a Penrith team that has bullied them for several years. It is the game that they do want to rip in. I actually think it's a big game for Canberra, maybe their biggest to conclude the season. And this is kind of what they're all about, is punching above their weight when they are written off. I could also see Penrith should cruise, but I could also see the Panthers being a little bit casual with it, while I think the Raiders could throw the kitchen sink. So that's why I stayed away from this line.
I actually do like the Panthers in this one. I like them a lot, to be honest. And I look at this Raiders side. I'll start with them, and we'll go back 3 rounds when they versed that Bulldogs side. And I think that game almost gave them a little bit of false confidence that they are up to that standard of play. They were energized in that one for Papa's 300. And since that, it's been a really poor run. I looked at their last 2 games. It's a combined scoreline loss of 28 points to 88. And this is a Raiders side that when we look at what is the strength or what makes them a good side throughout the last 5 or so years, it has been their defense. So the fact that they've conceded 88 in the past 2 weeks is concerning. The same effort areas that they had against the Bulldogs, they're gone missing, particularly last round, it must be said, where they were just blown off the park in every single aspect. Now, previously on the show and throughout this year, I sit here and I say I'm looking for spots where they'll be motivated by Ricky Stewart, and then I'll look for the upset with the Raiders. But with their season officially gone now, I'm not necessarily convinced that the message will get through to the players. And even if it does get through to the players, I don't think Ricky Stewart will get the same buy-in that he had previously, because, you know, Ricky Stewart is a great coach for revving up his players, getting them up emotionally. But I just don't see that being effective if you know the season's over and you're not really playing for too much. I think the biggest factor here would be, I believe this would be Elliott Whitehead's last ever game at GIO Stadium. And he's been at the Raiders and been their captain for a while there. So that's one aspect I'm looking at. But then when I go to the Raiders and I looked at how many points they're scoring this year, it sits at an average of 19 points per game. Only the Tigers and Knights score less points than them on average. And the Panthers only concede an average of 16. So they're conceding less than what the Raiders are scoring. It's probably easier to score points in the NRL than it is to defend against points. And generally, we will always caution elite sides coming off losses. The Panthers are doing just that after losing to the Melbourne Storm. The Panthers have not lost in Canberra for over 8 years, and the Panthers have won their last 5 in a row over the Raiders. I see this as a game where Jerome Luai has an opportunity to really step up and grab that motivation and challenge of being the main playmaker here. And then his partner, Brad Schneider, is someone who was with the Canberra for 3 or 4 years and barely got to go in first grade. He was only a depth option, and even then I don't even think he was the first choice depth. So all things considered, I've got the Panthers here at the line. I'm not sure where the Raiders' motivation comes from, but as you said for the Panthers, I know their motivation comes from, 1, correcting the errors last round, 2, Luai wanting to step up with Cleary gone, and 3, as you also said, wanting to ensure they maintain a home final there in the top 4. All right, mate, game 5 is Saturday, 5:30 p.m. Storm host the Dolphins at Amy Park. Line was set at minus 14.5 against the Storm. Hasn't moved. For the Dolphins, they'll welcome back Mark Nichols, and for the Storm, Tyron Wishart moves to the wing. Grant Anderson is out, and Sualavi Fa'alongo joins their bench. Now, Dolphins come really close to winning this one in their last meeting, winning. I think they lost by 6, but they are still yet officially to record a victory over the Storm. They've not beat them yet. Do you see them breaking that and getting the job done in Melbourne?
It's a tough ask. It was a beauty of a game at Suncorp, and the Finns are probably just going to fall short of making the finals, a maiden trip to the finals, and they will look back at some close calls, including that Storm game where you're right, they're down 6, but they're making line breaks. They're knocking on the door in the final set of that game and thinking that they've at least sent the game to golden point there. And there's been a few, unfortunately, this year games that the Dolphins almost had won or came very close to winning. And when it's all said and done, probably finish a win outside the finals, unless the Finns can get the upset here. That might be what's required because the Finns need to pick up 2 points on St. George. And I think St. George will win 2 of the final 3. So that does mean the Finns would have to win their last 3 games. The tough part is that we're trying to decide, in terms of the line. If the Dolphins come into this game with a must-win mentality, right, we've got to give it everything we've got, because if we don't win this game, our finals destiny is out of our hands and we may miss the finals. When you amp yourself up that you have to win, and then suddenly you're down 10, you're down 12, or you're down 16 or whatever in the second half, you can be a little bit more shell-shocked that, we had to win this game. And you're not thinking about saving face or keeping it close. You're just kind of thinking about how everything that you worked for and game planned for just hasn't gone right for you. So that makes the Storm very dangerous. Melbourne are as capable as anybody of running up a score. We explained why it's important for the Finns. It's less important for Melbourne this game. So that could be a reason to play the Dolphins, because the Storm don't need to win this. But the Storm will definitely want to win because it will give them total flexibility and luxury of when they might choose to rest players, including potentially earn a rest next week and not send the best stars up to Townsville. If you lose this week, then maybe Bellamy punishes them and doesn't want to rest them. And then suddenly the minor prems, not necessarily, or still in their control, but not entirely secure. So I would definitely lean to the Storm in this one, because they should just outmatch the Finns, and so tough to handle in Melbourne. And I do think that the Stars will all be focused, knowing that they're probably getting a week off next week.
I think I'll start there as well with Melbourne's home record. I think when we talk most daunting road trips in the NRL, the Storm would have to be right up there in Melbourne. They have a 75% all-time record at home. That is ultra, ultra impressive. I think the Titans, for context, is 40% or something like that. Maybe not the best example, but we're definitely not that. I can tell you that.
Yeah, meanwhile, what context is that?
Yeah.
You're comparing them with a subpart, sorry, mate, but a very below average historical team.
To be fair, yeah, that was probably the worst comparison I should have made. I will take that back. And if we weren't live, I'd say edit that out. The Storm have won 17 of their past 19 at home as well. So that stat is obviously continuing on. Now, that being said, Winnie, this is an interesting one for me, and maybe you'll find it interesting as well. The Dolphins did get close at Suncorp. They lost by 6 points. The time before that at Suncorp, they lost by 8 points. So I think they'll come to this game with a fair bit of belief. And I do have a question mark over it being their first ever time in Amy Park and how they respond. But if you remember, I had that same question mark when they played the Panthers at Bluebet. And I said, look, Panthers are so dominant at Bluebet, but I don't think the Dolphins fear it because they've never been there before to experience it. Could that same thing play out here in Amy Park? Now, I will say some of the Dolphins players are familiar with that ground. In particular, of course, Jesse Bromwich, who will become the 10th most NRL cap player of all time here. So I hope the Dolphins are right up for it there. I did also have a note here to caution any bets with the Storm right up until final team list for this stretch home, because when you mentioned resting players there, Craig Bellamy did say at the press conference he will be resting players. He's just not sure whether it will be all at once or kind of phase throughout these last couple rounds there. With 3 games left, I think it's unlikely he starts this week. I think it'd be more likely 50% of their team missing round 26, the next 50% missing in round 27. But you just don't know. So I would have to wait and see there if I was going to play the Storm, that is. But I'm going to play Dolphins instead. So it actually, kind of plays into my favor, because if Storm rest, then that comes more into the Dolphins line there. But I look at the Dolphins in their effort last round against the Bulldogs. Yes, that was a solid loss, but this is a 14.5 line. The last time they lost by a margin this solid was round 17 to the Dragons. And since that game, they have played sides like the Roosters and the Panthers and kept it within 14.5 points. As far as I see it, their season is on the line here, but the Storm don't have as much to play for because the minor premiership is all but secured. So I can see the Storm winning, but not by a large of margin of 15 plus. So therefore, my prediction will be Dolphins at the line here. I think they can keep it relatively close in Melbourne. Alrighty, game 6, Saturday, 7:35.
Sorry, mate. Bonus tip is from Nicole, and it is for that game. So
Everyone, it's Nicole from Wiki. Only 3 full rounds of NRL action to go. Look, it is just past 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I found Jerome Hughes at $3.60 on Bet365. Model, most other bookies, and his historical striker, it would all have him around $2.50 to about $3, and 365 has him at $3.60. So love that anytime try score play. Nice and early. Last weekend, we hit Atkinson at 29s in the article and Sean Johnson at 15s to score any of the first 3 tries. So as always, check out our free content and tips. Jump on Google Wiki Linktree, our Discord as well, and truly crack 5,000. So we'll catch you on there. Enjoy the last few weekends of NRL action before the finals.
Thank you very much to Nicole for that tip, as always.
Mate, all the players in the NRL that he could tip, that Nicole could tip for an anytime try, he's tipped Jerome Hughes multiple times this year. And it's always on 365. I really do think their model cannot comprehend or rationalize that a halfback should be so much shorter. But for a try, but Jerome Hughes, not your typical halfback. So it makes a lot of sense. It's easy to see that one coming through.
100%. When we talk running games for halves, he definitely has one of the best in the competition. And yeah, Ryan says as well, Bet365 plays really good on halves. I think they play good on all anytime try scorers, to be honest. They always seem to have a little bit more fat around the bones, if you will. Game 6 is at Saturday, 7:35 p.m. The Rabbitohs host the Knights at Accor Stadium. Line was set at -6.5 against the Knights, and it has not moved. Jack Cogger comes into their halves because Tyson Gamble is out, and Dylan Lucas is back at centre. Will Price is on the bench. For the Rabbitohs, no Cody Walker due to head injury protocol, so Dean Hawkins is their halfback. All right, Winnie, we have 2 sides where genuinely this could be the first time in NRL history 2 sides are meeting where they genuinely could not have got closer to winning last round. The Rabbitohs scored off a forward pass on the last play of the game, and the Knights actually kicked the winning field goal only for it to be disallowed. They now meet again with not too much to play for, mate, but who do you think wins this one and why?
That's right. That's why my very first note was we have 2 very deflated sides here. And after watching the manner of the Newcastle defeat, I said to myself, there's just no way I can play the Knights next week. That was absolutely brutal. Even in the presser, Ponga's saying, well, that we've got to try and win next week, which means we've got to get over this game, but it's not going to be easy. Like, he was shell-shocked, Brian, the same. I just don't have any good reasons to play Souths either, who also lost narrowly. The difference in that loss is it probably doesn't hurt as much just because there wasn't much at stake. But now Cody Walker's out as well, so even less reason to like Souths. You're getting part of your wish with Cogger in the halves now, mate, and with Price on the bench. Maybe at some stage those 2 will link up. My default has to be Newcastle because they're at home, so at least motivation could be supplied there. In the post-game press conference, O'Brien also said that Bradman Best should be back this week. So I had my eye out for that, but he's not omitted, not even in the reserves. So there's no boost. And I thought it would have been rushing Bradman Best because I originally heard that hamstring injury might be season ending. So if Best was named this week, you'd be worried that they're rushing him back in a total, desperation move, as it was when they played him straight after Origin 3. That's not the case. And I'm just going to pass because I don't find a strong edge for either team. I don't know how to read Souths because it's very questionable focus and intent for the Rabbitohs. Maybe that means they play carefree, but you could also see Newcastle winning just because they would be willing to outwork the Rabbitohs.
I am with you on this one, mate. I struggled to kind of find an edge for either side here, and not because either side's traveling so well. Unfortunately for both, it's much the opposite because in their last 5 games, they both have one win, and it was both over the Tigers, which again, not to be rude to the Tigers, but it's a predictable result, and most teams are getting the win there. Another change in the halves for the Knights. You guys all know my feelings on that situation, though this one was forced to injury, so fair play there to Adam O'Brien. I think as good as the Knights were last round against the Sharkies, right, the reason why I predict that they played that well was because their season was still somewhat of a chance to be alive. Now their season is essentially officially over. So where does that motivation come from? I don't know, and I don't know what night side we can expect here. But what I will say is I don't expect the same effort, and I don't expect the same energy as we got last round against the Sharks side. Whereas the Rabbitohs have known for a while now that their season is over. So it's not unfamiliar territory to them. And when I looked at the Rabbitohs draw for the rest of this season, this game could be their quote-unquote grand final that we keep referencing. They're at home, and if their players are looking towards the draw, they probably recognize they're not beating the Panthers or the Roosters. So this does loom as their last chance to win in 2024 and have a win with players that are leaving like Damien Cook. But I just don't have too much faith in them. I think if I had to make a prediction here, I would prefer South with a head start. I can see Ryan from YouTube has them at plus $7.5, but I just can't, mate. I can't get a read on this game at all, and it's just due to poor form from both sides. So I will do myself a favor, mate, and stay off this one. No tip or prediction form.
As Ryan says, they're two teams you'd want to fade them both this week if you could. Just unfortunately, they're playing each other.
Yes, that's a brilliant point as well. Game 7, Sunday, 2 p.m. Titans host the Roosters at Cbus Super Stadium. Line is set at minus 15.5 against the Roosters, who welcome back big Jared Waerea-Hargreaves from suspension. That moves Spencer Leniu to the bench. Nat Butcher is back, and Sandon Smith also joins their bench. Two big inclusions for the Titans, Moeki Fotuaika and Beau Fermor are back, and Winnie will be here live because I figured in all likelihood I will need someone to cuddle when the Roosters run us off the park. Unfortunately, that's how I see this one going, mate. Do you see it going in a similar fashion?
Well, we're very fortunate to get the opportunity. We get to watch this in the Toppy Lounge, and when we picked this one out on the calendar, you knew you were going to get to see an exciting team and see plenty of talent in the Roosters. So I'm excited to see that side up close and personal. The Titans are an exciting team to watch too, generally in daytime conditions. So this game could have plenty of points. The closest I probably came to a bet in this one was just play the overs, which is, I think, the highest total of the round. So there's a lot of points you've got to get, but you're not going to be surprised either with the talent on both sides and the speed as well. I'll get to why I didn't play the over. I'll probably highlight the most interesting aspect to me, which could be the top try scorer race, which you can bet on, and it is a 2-horse race essentially. Now, AKP has 20 tries and did have a 5-try lead and was $1.10 going into round 24. However, he didn't score, and Dom Young got a hat-trick, and that's a hat-trick as well as being rested early, which now means it's just 2 tries between them, and the Roosters are 15-point favourites here and will be favoured to win by bigger margins than the Titans the next couple of weeks. So this is going to be big. I think now the odds is AKP around $1.70 and Young $2.40. And I know plenty of people have backed each of those options at much longer odds earlier in the year, and will be very interested in how this one plays out. The Titans have come back to earth. You yourself, Clarkey, did say a couple of weeks ago that if you looked at previous 5 weeks of form, the Titans were in as good a form as anyone in the comp. And then now it's been a couple of humbling defeats since then, which you said that you feared could be coming for your team. Whereas the Roosters just seem to be ascending, going through the gears, ready to launch a major finals assault, and want to keep winning because they want to keep their options open for resting, as well as if they could pip Penrith for that home final in the first week of the finals and get to play week 1 of the finals at the worst draining footy field on the planet, Allianz. This is a big line in this game, but the Roosters are so capable of covering it. And you go from playing the Eels, and it's okay because my best bet won anyway, and the Eels did win. Sorry, the Roosters did win by 26 points, which was well above the line. But you have to wonder how much would they have won by on a normal track. It was it was a absolute swamp, and it's going to be the complete opposite coming onto this lightning fast track at Cbus in the day. So how many points? I mean, the Roosters, my point is the Roosters still scored 38 last week. How many, if they bring that kind of form to this one, it could be 50. no way I'm going against the Roosters. So I was never going to take the plus in this game. The reason I have not laid the points is I respect some important players coming back for the Titans in Fermor and Fodawaker. You are off a couple of humbling defeats back home, which should mean focus is there. Last time you played at home, you being the Titans, you lost 44-0. So you'd think that their defensive efforts should be there. And I've mentioned that scoring points in the finals won't be the Roosters' issue or undoing. What the Roosters want to find is an elite level of defensive play. I think the Roosters are focused on shoring up that element of their game, and those could just be the reasons why we don't get a super high total. And when you play over 53.5, you need a lot of points. You can get 28 points in the first half, and you still need 26, in the second half. And if you get any dry spells or a few minutes go by and then a team bombs a chance or two, it actually is a lot of points to make up. But none of us are going to be surprised if there are a lot of tries, and that should actually make it even more fun to attend.
I'm clinging on to one bit of hope as a Titans fan for this game, mate. The last time we were at home, and I literally saw no world where we win, was against the Cowboys last year when they were on like a 7-game winning streak and we beat them. Now, unfortunately, we've probably had hundreds of home games in our time, and that's one example. So I don't like my odds in this one. And I have to be honest, I think the Roosters will win here and win well. I went back in their last 3. They were averaging 37 points per game. Their attack is just sensational. They are absolutely flying at the moment. And I just don't see how this Titans side with their current form can stop that. This year, we are conceding an average of 26 points per game, which is up there as the worst in the competition. As you said, last time we're at home, 44-0. So there's no real evidence to suggest the Titans will be able to stop that Roosters wave of attack. And when we came into the Sharks game and Titans were favourites 2 weeks ago, I tipped us, but my only point of concern was I know my team and I know that win over the Broncos will be a lot of the players' version of a grand final. And since that point, we've looked the worst we have since like round 15 or something. The effort areas, everything we did that was fun and great against the Broncos has really just disappeared over the past 2 weeks. And we are playing so poor in attack and defense. So I don't even know which one we're playing worse in, and that's what makes it so scary. So we concede 0 points to the Broncos in the second half. 1 week later, we concede 30 points to the Sharks in the first half. Like, how does that happen in between 40 minutes of football? Then we go to the 36 points they scored in the second half against the Broncos. And now across the next 160 minutes of football, the Titans have only scored 16. One of those came against the very first touch of the ball against the Dragons. The other was a weird almost knock-on by Jaden Campbell where everyone kind of stopped. So realistically, if you break it down, the Titans have had 1 try in the past 2 games. The Roosters are solid as anyone in this competition in attack. And defensively, I think they do need to improve a little bit as they go down this final home stretch. But the Titans are the team that they can improve that on. We have not beaten the Roosters at home for over 8 years. The Roosters have won their last 10 games in a row over us. So my prediction here is Roosters 13+ and a James Tedesco try. He has 9 tries in his past 7 games against us, and he's also scored in 2 of the last 3 games he's played in. So I feel like he's going well enough. I feel like it'll be a points fest where they will be making lots of line breaks. And when the Roosters make line breaks, there's always going to be Teddy backing up with an option to pass inside when you get to the fullback. Which brings me to, Winnie, Clarkey's collect. Again, I'm not making you guys wait. It's just the nature of this is the last game in that, so I will give it to you now. I'm taking Manly and Roosters -9.5. Now, that was the 2 teams I took last week by 12. No set pattern there, Winnie, just pure coincidence. I can see the Manly Seagulls winning by more than 10 against the Tigers, and unfortunately, I see the Roosters winning by more than 10 over us. And then we'll take the Panthers head-to-head. You were a bit iffy on that line. I saw your points, and I do agree with some of them, but I just don't see this Raiders side beating the Panthers, who are coming off a loss. I really don't see that. So all up, that pays $2.93 on TopSport. Fingers crossed we can get that through and keep climbing up. Clarkey's collect, which currently sits at plus 15.8 units. So I'm starting to get up there slowly but surely, mate. I will type that out as.
Yep, you type it out. I'll respond to Colt's comment. Colt says it's going to be a repeat of the Titans win versus the Roosters in round 25, 2013, when they were top. And that gives me a chance to repeat a story I have told a couple of times on the pod, but it's one of my greatest ever punting moments. I was on the Titans that day, and while the reason I'll never forget it is because the Titans head-to-head price in that final round in 2013 was $13. That is the highest odds I've ever seen for a team head-to-head in the NRL, and I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Like, even when teams have played Penrith or something and the line's been in the 20s, the bookies still probably flat out giving you kind of $10 head-to-head. The Titans were $13 head-to-head and plus 24.5. Not only was it the highest odds I've ever seen, it ends up winning, and I actually picked it. So I had the plus 24.5. I took a bit more on the plus 12.5, which was like $4.50, but I had some on that head-to-head 13s. And this was a Roosters team that went on to win the premiership that year, but luckily had a letdown with obviously their eyes on bigger fish to fry. And that's what yourself and Colt and any other Titans fans are going to be hoping for. Hey, last time, I've only been to the Toppy Lounge once. We had a TryPod event there. I think it was a couple of years ago. You were significant home underdogs to Manly. On the day of the game, Tino had to miss it because of the birth of his child, gave you even less chance, and you beat him by 20 points. So you went from like a 10-point underdog to a 20-point win. So maybe we're the good luck charm, the TryPod for Toppy and for the Titans.
Yes, so there need to be a big asterisk on that. It needs to be the top sport good luck, because I've not been in a Titans win live since 2021. It's a kind of a joke, but also people hate me in the front line, the Titans supporter group, because every time I go, we lose. Every time I go, we lose. So when Colt said that, I was like, I don't remember that game. Why was I not on that? I was 16 at the time. So probably good that I wasn't on that game, Colt.
And I mean, you're going to have to take my word for it, guys, because we started the pod in 2015. So this is pre-pod days, but obviously had many years of reps before the pod. So when I say this has been my worst ever season punting, I'm not even talking about 10 years. I'm talking about closer to 20, unfortunately. But you're always going to have your worst year at some point.
Mate, Winnie has been a bookie's worst nightmare since the day he turned 18 years old. Game 8 is at Sunday, 4:05 p.m. The Dragons host the Sharkies. We're at Wynn Stadium, and the line was set at -3.5 against the Sharkies. That's now moved to -4.5. They welcome back Braden Trindle, Teague Wilton, Tom Hazelton, and Kale Irrell. Meanwhile, the Dragons welcome back Raymond Faitala Mariner. Winnie, this is the final game of the round. It's a fantastic rivalry between these two sides, and I believe it will be game of the round. How do you see this one when you break it down?
Hopefully it is one of the games of the round, because, again, my best bet is either team 1-12, and it's $1.80 on 365. If I have to pick a winner, I will lean to the Sharks, because the first thing I thought about was who needs this game more. The Sharkies are clinging on to that top 4 spot. The pressure continues to be applied from teams in 5th and 6th. And I also think the Sharkies will be very disappointed in how they played against Newcastle. They shouldn't have found themselves in a position of being 18-10 down, needing to pull that one out of the fire, especially after leading 10-0. But when you can treat a game like a loss, but you can get that spark from pulling out a somewhat lucky win, it can really give a team a boost. However, I've got real respect for this St. George team, especially at home, and a rivalry game, if anything, amps that up and generally can make a match closer. I liked the move of Jack Bird returning to the side, playing in there in the halves. But, of course, Cronulla's halves are also strengthened with Trindle back, and Atkinson has had a chance to flourish. While he missed a couple of kicks early, more than redeemed himself in the narrow win last week. That's why I lean Cronulla. It's worth saying -3.5 is available in some bookies, and +4.5 is available on others. So depending on who you like, you can lay the 3.5 or take the +4.5. But for me, my favorite play is 1-12, because I've got two teams that are playing at a pretty high level. They're both going to make the finals. The style of play is that both sides want to outwork the opponent, and it's a derby. So it should be a beauty to cap round 25.
Yeah, I see it that way as well. I think I prefer the Dragons, though, if I'm absolutely honest here. I think it being close, I can't see either side winning this one by 13 plus. I just feel like the Sharks are a little bit susceptible after their game last round against the Knights. Now, it could be one of those instances where you almost lost, so you treat it as a loss and learn a lot from it. But I do think that after that win against the Titans, they probably did get a little bit of false hope. And I'll say it, I had him as a Clarkey's collect leg, and we got lucky. We got away with it, absolutely. The Knights were probably the better side over that 80 minutes there. I just really see the Dragons being up for this. Not only because their coach is up against his former side, I think it's more so the fact that if they do win here, it really does solidify them as a top 8 side. It would make the Dolphins really, really hard to catch them from there, especially if they lose to the Storm earlier this round. Now, if you do like the Dragons here, you probably hope the Dolphins do spring an upset against Melbourne, because then instead of it being a nice to win game for the Dragons, it more becomes well, we must win this. We got to get this done. The Dragons season has followed that very win-loss trajectory, and that goes back a long time. As I told you guys last round, their only back-to-back wins this year were both including the West Tigers. But at some stage, they need to break that, right, Winnie? I mean, I can't see it realistic that a side genuinely goes through a whole NRL season going win-loss, win-loss, win-loss for 95% of it. I just can't see it. Meanwhile, the Dragons have won 4 of their last 5 games in Wollongong this year. Their only loss was to the Panthers, and this is also their last game in Wollongong for the year, so they will want to go out with a bang. When I look at how these sides have gone against each other recently, the Sharks have won their past 8 in a row over the Dragons. This is a rivalry game. Like, surely that can't continue. No, this is a rivalry game that goes back a long time. There's a lot of history about it. So, 8 in a row for the Sharks, I think that is super impressive. I'd probably use it as a reason why I like the Sharks if I was on them. Maybe I'm doing that thing where you say I twist the stats a little bit, but I just can't see it continuing, mate. I think the Dragons will be on the front foot here. Christian Tuipulotu, he ran 200-plus meters last round. Zach Lomax, I think that the wingers will get through some big meters, get them on the front foot, and if they're able to do that, then we know Ben Hunt does lead the NRL in try assists, and he is managing this team a little bit differently now because of having not Kyle Flanagan next to him, who is traditionally more of a managing half as well. He has a running half in Jack Bird. So that allows Ben Hunt to control the pace of the game, control everything, and it essentially gives them, as far as I'm seeing, an extra center in a roaming role or an extra lock in Jack Bird, which makes him dangerous in attack. Last time for the Dragons in Wollongong this year, I think they show up. I will predict Dragons at the line for my prediction, Winnie, but I also like yours of 1 to 12 as well. I think you could play it either way there, mate.
I like the way you bring up the Flanagan factor too, because he got the chance. They went to Cronulla. They came up short. It was 2010 Cronulla earlier this year, but Flano himself made a big deal about it. Even who did the Dragons played? I forget now. Who did the Dragons play the other week where the media asked Flano, "Were you disappointed you didn't even get an interview with this team?"
Bulldogs.
And Flano. Yeah, the Bulldogs, that's right. They said, it's a bigger game for you because like the Bulldogs didn't respect you and give you an interview. And he said, that's a joke. Like it's no more important than any other game. He said, it's not like we're playing the Sharks or something. Like he even said that, now that's a different story. The Sharks is personal. And the extra element of spice to this is that if the Dragons beat the Sharks, it may cost the Sharks a top 4 spot. And then there's a fair likelihood that this could then be the week 1 finals game. And Flano would get another chance to play the Sharkies at Shark Park and end their season. So I'd love to see St. George get up and win this one for the extra entertainment to end the year. But I'll be perfectly happy if either side wins within 12 points.
Yeah, I hope the Dragons win as well. I'll be cheering them there. That comment from Christopher Holmes that we had on screen there is completely true. Great fella. I had a chat with him at the pub before, and our family were playing in the playground as well before. He has the number plate Red V on his car, and I was like, mate, that's the best impulse buy ever. And sure enough, he said, if you guys lose, I want to see a photo of you in front of it. So there will be a photo with me with the double thumbs down with a sad face in front of the Red V number plate, mate. Alrighty, it's been a long show, so I will get you one last time to recap all of your best bets for this round, please.
So there were only 3 New Zealand plus 7.5, $1.91, 365 in Sean Johnson's farewell game against the Doggies Friday night. Also Friday night, taking Brisbane minus 8.5, $1.91, but it's that price everywhere basically. And then the game we just mentioned, Dragon Sharks, either 1 to 12, which is $1.80 on 365.
Big fan if you work, mate. Clarkey's collect this week is Manly and Roosters to win by minus 9.5. So we're looking for 10-point margins from those sides. And Panthers head-to-head. That pays $2.93 on Top Sport. And I did see someone say they found it a little bit more on Ladbrokes. They found it at $3.11, though I can't find that comment now. There we go. C_Tulio on YouTube says Clarkey's collect is $3.11 on Ladbrokes. So another option there, guys. Alrighty, at this stage, we will close the show and say thank you very much for your viewership. We are in the final home stretch home here before finals. Super exciting time of the year. We've still got best bets. We've still got all the beautiful people rolling in their live comments, and we appreciate you all. So we will see you at some stage on Monday live with our recap of this round. That's all from me, and over to you. We need to farewell the show.
Yeah, let's aim for same time, 5:30 Monday. A mixed matchup market should be up tomorrow off a very juicy win last week. Thanks as always, guys, for tuning in. Drink it in. There's only 3 regular season rounds, so only 3 more weekends with 8 games of footy. So let's enjoy it. Let's make the most of it. I can't wait for this weekend to meet you in person again, mate, and hang out with a bit of a pod crew. People can let us know in the thread if if they're going to be attending the game at Seabus. We could meet others as well. It should be a great weekend, and then we'll unpack it all Monday. Best of luck, guys. Let us know what you think of the best bets as well as your own, and Lego.